Good afternoon and good morning to our West Coast listeners. My name is Juan Thomas. I have the honor of serving as chair of the ABA Civil Rights and Social Justice section. And I have the high honor today to interview my dear friend and colleague, the incoming president of the American Bar Association. This coming Monday, Mary Smith will become the first Native American woman to serve as president of the American Bar Association. Mary, welcome. So glad to have you today.
Welcome, Juan. I'm so excited to be here with you today.
Well, thank you for being our guest as we kick off the annual meeting. Many of us are headed to Denver later this week to kick off the annual meeting. I just want to ask you, just as the incoming president, what is your theme for the upcoming bar year?
Well, my theme is lifting our voices, charting the future. And that theme encompasses a lot of different things. First, lawyers need to lift their voices. We are so important in so many respects. I think lawyers in the American Bar Association have been at the center of certainly the greatest legal issues, but certainly even the biggest issues of our time. So we need to lift our voices, and we all are charting the future. Another component of it is young lawyers and law students. That's a big focus of mine. I try to infuse them in whatever I do. And I know a lot of people always say that young lawyers are the future leaders. I believe that they're the leaders now, and they need to have a voice at the table. And then finally, I think there's just so much going on in terms of the law and with our country and threats to democracy that all of us, particularly lawyers, I think lawyers are the keepers of democracy. We need to lift our voices because we are charting the future of our country.
So, Madam soon-to-be president, how can our section specifically, Civil Rights and Social Justice section, which you've been a long-term member of our section, we want to thank you for your membership and your leadership in our section. You're a past council member. How can we be a partner with you, and how can we support you and your objectives over the next bar year?
Well, Chair Thomas, I know you're finishing your year. I would say you already are. Keep doing what you're doing. You're doing such important work. They always say that the section of civil rights and social justice is the conscience of the ABA, and I believe that. You're doing such important work. Think about all the different committees that you have. So for instance, I mean, I was at a reception the other night, and it was stated that there are over 500 laws pending to target LGBTQ people. And I know that's a big focus of work in the section. Just keep doing it. Women's health care is at risk. And I know that's another big area that you work on in the section. There's just everything that you cover, from civil rights to education, to First Amendment, to immigration, to LGBTQ. Just keep doing what you're doing. And I guess I'll ask how I can support you all, because I really appreciate all the work and passion that civil rights and social justice and its members bring to the ABA, and the important work that's done from the section.
Well, you've been a tremendous partner and member for many years, and so we look forward to collaborating with you over the next bar year. And I know our incoming chair of our section, Robin Runge, will be working with you very closely next year. And I'm not going to go away. I will be right by your side whenever you need me as well. Mary, you have a tremendous background. You have worked at the White House. You've worked in the administration. You've clerked for the federal bench. You have worked in law firms, corporate, civic life, served on corporate boards. You've done so much. Could you kind of share some of your personal or professional journey that led you to become our next ABA president?
Well, I started out, my undergraduate degree was in math and computer science. So at the time I was in college, I wasn't even thinking of going to law school, but I did work with computer science for a few years. And the part of that job that I really liked was helping people. And so, but I thought there were other parts of my personality, of me, that I wasn't utilizing and helping people solely with their computer problems. And then I thought about, what can I do to utilize different aspects of myself. And the answer was law school, because I think lawyers at their heart, they serve the profession, they serve their clients. And that's what I enjoy doing, is helping people. And that's why I became a lawyer. So as you mentioned, I have worked in almost all sectors except probably being a judge or a law professor. I've worked at a big firm, a small firm. I've worked in the federal government several times. I've worked in state government, and I've enjoyed it all. I think it's brought a lot of diversity to my thought, and I've met a lot of amazing lawyers and other business people and others throughout my career. And so the reason I became involved in the ABA, and you will find this interesting, was actually in large part the section of civil rights and social justice. As you mentioned, I worked in the White House, and when I was in the White House, I worked on a number of issue areas. I worked on an eclectic mix of issues, including civil rights. I worked on homelessness. I worked on equal pay for women, domestic violence, Native American issues, a lot of the issues that are in the section of civil rights and social justice.
Right.
And then when I left the White House, I worked at a large law firm, Skadden Arps, and I really enjoyed my work. I enjoyed my colleagues, but in private practice, as a lot of us know, you do not get to select your clients, the clients select you. So
That's right.
I wasn't really working on a lot of civil rights matters or some of the other policy issues that I had worked on in the White House. And short of being in government, I looked around and said, where can I continue working in these issues in the private sector? And the answer was the ABA, and the answer within the ABA was the section of civil rights and social justice. So I became very involved in the section, and actually one of the first items that I worked on was a voting rights resolution that went before the House of Delegates.
Oh, really?
And yes, and so then I served in several of the committees. I've served on the Public Education Committee. I've always continued doing work for the Native American Concerns Committee, and just stayed connected to the section, because just as I did then, I do now fully believe in your work and think you're doing some of the most important work that we're doing at the ABA. So I think continuing with that theme of service, I did run for ABA secretary and served as ABA secretary. And following my term as secretary, I thought that there was more that I could do, more that I would like to do. There's certainly a lot of work for all of us to do. And that's when I decided to run for president, because I really thought that I believe in the work that the American Bar Association does. I think that all the other state and local bars, they do amazing work, but we are able to do things on a national scale and actually partner with those bar associations and partner with other organizations. And I wanted to continue to try to help and advance that work.
Right. Well, you've done a tremendous job in that. And I'm so glad at some point in college, you decided to go to law school. And so Mary, as I mentioned in my introduction, you are going to be the first Native American woman to serve as ABA president. You are a tribal member of the Cherokee Nation, correct?
Yes.
And so to the extent that that is significant, why is that significant? And how does that relate to the importance of your view of the importance of diversity, equity, and inclusion?
Well, let me just tell you a story about, I think that encapsulates why it's significant. Earlier this year, I was at the 50th anniversary of the National Native American Bar Association. The National Native American Bar Association has been in existence for 50 years, and they had
You're a past president.
I'm a past president,
Yes.
and they had a wonderful celebration. And while I was there, of course, I was talking to a lot of Native lawyers, both young and I'll say more seasoned. But one of the younger Native lawyers that I was talking to, she came up to me and she said, Mary, I belong to the National Native American Bar Association, but I never really belonged to the American Bar Association because I really didn't think they had anything that was for me there. And she said, but I see you there, and I realized that there is something for me there. And so if just by me being in this position, that young attorneys and law students can say, oh, I can see myself there, or there are things that the ABA does that I want to work on. That's why it matters.
Mhm. Well, I'm glad you said that, because it's so important to be that representative and to be that voice. So I'm hoping your colleague will join the ABA and become active. That's great. Mary, in 2015, you wrote an article for the Human Rights magazine titled "Native American Attorneys Systematically Excluded in the Legal Profession." Could you speak specifically about the state of the Native American lawyer today, and how do we support and/or increase Native American lawyers in the profession?
Yeah, I mean, I'm glad you asked that one, but I fear it's not just Native lawyers. If you look at the statistics that the ABA puts out, the number of African American lawyers over the past decade has actually gone down a little bit. And basically the number of Native lawyers has stagnated. They're 0.5% of the profession. So we have a lot of work to do on all fronts. We need to work on pipeline issues. We need to work once they're in the profession to help them succeed. And particularly with the recent Supreme Court case that came down, I think all of us are going to have to roll up our sleeves and work even harder than we have been. But the pace of diversification of our profession is in some cases actually going a little bit backwards, and the profession is still not as diverse as our population. And I would like to see the legal profession reflect America. I would like to see any young person, whatever color, race, creed, religion, disability, LGBTQ, feel that they can go to law school if they would like to, because law touches everything in society. And it's so important to have all the bright minds that we can in our great profession.
Right. I read an article over the weekend that talked about how, in light of what happened with the Supreme Court decision around affirmative action, many corporations are beginning to cut back and slash their DE&I departments. So there's a real pushback and setback in light of that. Even though this decision was narrowly tailored for college admission, it's being kind of universally applied in other aspects. So we've got some work to do in that regard.
Yeah, and it's kind of interesting because when I was in private practice, one of the earlier affirmative action cases was the Michigan case, Brother v. Bollinger, and that was in 2003. And I actually wrote an amicus brief for several members of Congress, including then Majority Leader Dick Gephardt and James Clyburn and a few other members of Congress. And Dick Gephardt felt that it was very important to file a brief in that case because in his own law school class at the University of Michigan, there was only one African-American student that was who then became Judge Harry Edwards. And it's very telling that at the end of the Grutter decision that was written by Justice O'Connor, she said that in 25 years, I hope, and I'm paraphrasing, I hope that we won't need this any longer. And we're almost butting up against the 25 years. And it can be depressing to say that we still do, things are still, there's still not equal opportunity for everyone in this country. And we need to change that.
Yeah. Well, I have much respect for Justice O'Connor. I'm not sure I agree with the number she put on that, but that's for another discussion at another time. What advice would you give that you received in your journey to become ABA president?
Well, I did solicit advice from many past ABA presidents because I wanted to tap into that wisdom. And I received some funny advice, but then some very sincere advice. One of the funnier pieces of advice, because as you can imagine, as ABA president, you have to attend, and I enjoy it, but part of the job, shall we say, is to attend receptions and dinners. And if you don't watch yourself, you could be eating a lot of hors d'oeuvres.
Right.
And so one piece of advice I got, which I am not actually going to accept, is to buy a bigger size clothing. I'm not going to do that. But seriously, a piece of advice I received was from Paulette Brown, who was also a first. She was the first African-American woman to be president of the American Bar Association, and she's a dear friend. And I saw that by her presidency, she inspired so many people, and I am honored to follow in her footsteps. But the advice she gave me was to be true to myself. And I think that's advice that all of us could use when we're embarking on a leadership journey, because it really is your North Star.
That's true. That's so true. Good piece of advice. So, Mary, I want you to pretend it is August 2024. You have completed your term as president. We're at the annual meeting, which will be in Chicago next summer. How do you want to see the ABA have grown or evolved during your year? And what type of legacy do you hope to leave?
Well, I hope that we have a lot of people in Chicago, which Juan is both of our hometowns.
Yep.
We'd love to see people there. But I think if just put simply, I want to leave the association in better stead than I found it. But if I can inspire young people and law students to serve the profession, to join the ABA, to increase our visibility, I will be happy. I know that we will be doing meaningful work over this next year on the most important issues of the day, whether it's on democracy issues, on artificial intelligence, on ensuring that LGBTQ rights are protected, or advancing women's rights. I will feel happy at the end of the day.
Well, I'm looking forward to seeing that come to fruition. I'm sure it will. But on a much lighter note, I'd like to end our discussion with our guests where people can learn a bit more about you on a personal level. What's the last book you read, or what book are you reading now?
Well, it's I'll cheat a little bit. It's a book that I'm rereading, and it actually involves the section again, because like I said, I've been very involved in this section. But about almost 2 years ago now, I helped plan a program for the section of civil rights with this World War II veteran, Lou Moore. He was a Chinese American who served in World War II. And he wrote a book called Eternal Love, about the love that he had for over 70 years with his wife, Nellie. After he was discharged from service, he was in New York City, and she was Japanese American. He's Chinese American. He saw her at the China Doll in New York, and a fateful meeting at a coffee shop a few days later, and started their over 70-year love affair. And he had such an amazing life, but just so in love with his wife and the amazing life that he had. And unfortunately, Nellie passed away during the days of COVID, and he was writing a book about their life story. And we did a program with the section on Veterans Day in 2021, and actually he was 98 or 99 at the
I
time.
remember that. Yeah,
and we gave him, he was awarded during the webinar for the ABA, the Congressional Medal. And so sadly, Lou passed away a little after his 100th birthday last year. And I was thinking about him. And so I started rereading his book, because his book is truly an American story about his love, his life, serving in the military, the discrimination that both he and Nellie faced. Nellie was incarcerated as a Japanese American and with her family during World War II. Later, they could not buy property in California. They had to have a white man buy it in his name and then transfer it to them. But yet he had such a joyful life and such an amazing life. And I've been rereading his book, Eternal Love.
That's a beautiful story. I need to pick that one up. I love that story. So so Mary, when you're not trying to change the world and practice law and do all the amazing things you do. What do you do for fun?
Um, Well, my friends probably say I'm boring, but I do like to go running. I do like to go to restaurants. I like to visit with friends. I like to read. So those are some of the things I like to do. I like to travel. I am traveling a lot
Of
for
course.
the American Bar Association, and I really enjoy meeting people. I was just in Alaska a few weeks ago, but actually I'm going to plan a non-ABA trip after my term ends next year.
But don't you also like Starbucks? I heard that about
Oh, yes. See, you had to mention that one. I was actually saying that to people. I do like Starbucks.
I won't say how much, but yes, I do. I didn't know that about you also. So, Mary, if you had to wake up tomorrow morning and you couldn't be ABA president and you couldn't be a lawyer, what would you be and why?
Well, one thing, I don't know if you know this about me, but I do like pop culture. I do like celebrities. I like reading. I guess I like reading about people's lives and about people's stories, whether they're historical figures or political figures or other leaders. But I do like to read about celebrities too. So I think I would be an entertainment reporter. And when I
Oh,
told some people that, they said, yes, I can picture you doing that. I could stand on the red carpet at the Oscars and say,
so
okay, Juan, what made you want to act in that
you,
movie?
you wouldn't want to be the entertainer. You'd want to be the entertainer reporter, not the
Yes,
entertainer.
entertainer reporter.
That's a good job. That's a good life. That's a good life. Mary Smith, thank you so much for being my guest today. Thank you for being my friend, my colleague, someone who I admire and look up to. Thank you for the support you've given not only our section, but also me personally and professionally. I want to also thank you on behalf of all of us who are members of the ABA. You truly make us proud, and we look forward to serving with you and helping you in any way that we can during your year as president. It's going to be a great year.
Well, thank you for those kind words, Juan. And I want to thank you for a successful year as chair of the section of civil rights and civil rights. And I know your theme was economic justice, and thanks so much for shining a light on that important issue and all the programming that you did throughout the year. So, and thank you for being my friend as well.
All right. Thank you all for listening, and we'll see you next week, and enjoy the annual conference this week here in Denver. Bye-bye.